The injury that was caused by Bertuzzi ended Moore's career. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law. My name is Gavin. I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Stephen Teal.
Hey, Gavin.
How are you doing, Stephen?
Hanging in there, buddy.
Hanging in. That's all we can ask for sometimes. My fingernails getting a little tired, by the way, but that's another story. So today we're going to talk about something that I always find remarkable from a lot of perspectives. I mean, we think about the world of sports as, as we're recording this, it's in the fall or winter, and we're in the full flight of football season and hockey season. And I always see the poor fellows getting carted off on the golf cart on a football game and think, wow, it's tragically if somebody is, worked their whole life to get somewhere. This could be it for them. They could be trucked off the field for the last time, never to return again. But we saw last year, Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills get hit in a frankly, pretty routine hit in a football game with his heart stopping, and I think he was technically dead for a moment or two until he was revived, back again playing. Remarkable story. But things that happen on the field or on the ice, if they happened in the real world, people would be doing pretty serious time in jail for what happened. And there's always a distinction, I suppose, between what happens in a sporting event and what happens in the real world, and how does the law of the land apply to the law of the arena or the football field. And, I guess we look back to, we think of, sports figures like hockey players or football players, what have you, as the modern day gladiators, if you will, but they're not really modern day gladiators. It's not a free-for-all melee out there where you are out to kill. I suppose some sports, thinking MMA might be close, but even there, I think there are some rules. And so it's the intersection between the law and the rules, if you will, of sport and where does criminal and civil liability in sports take some traction. And I think, Stephen, you're familiar with a number of examples where that's occurred.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, sports have rules of play. You raised football and hockey in particular. These are contact sports. You're entitled in hockey to certainly throw body checks. And during the course of the game, we all know if we watched any hockey game, some of those body checks are illegal. Some of the, slashing is a penalty. You can't deliberately take your stick and whack it across somebody's ankles or hands. And certainly tripping is a penalty. So this podcast basically arises out of an incident that happened in October of 2023, where a former NHL hockey player, Adam Johnson, playing in England, was killed in an on-ice incident where a skate blade basically cut or slashed his throat. And he died approximately 20 minutes later from the loss of blood. And now in England, the player who actually caused the injury has been charged with involuntary manslaughter. And, the listener needs to know, a lot of people participate still in amateur sports. I know from personally, Gavin, I play hockey every week. I get together. There are adult safe hockey leagues that are run. But just because you're playing a contact sport, and most of these are non-contact leagues that run, you can be exposed to both potential criminal liability or civil liability in the event that you injure somebody on the ice. And we've certainly seen a lot of, there have been both criminal cases and tort cases, Gavin, with respect to hockey injuries.
Yeah, for sure. And let's just back it up 1 second, just to give some of our listeners, and the lawyer listeners will be bored with this, but when we talk about the difference between the law that would apply on the street as opposed to in the arena or on the field. It really goes back to a concept of the law. And there's a rich history of law coming particularly out of the UK, of what I call sport law, which is lots of cases out of golf courses where someone didn't yell for and another golfer got hit in the noodle with a golf ball and suffered an injury. And that there would be a tort available there that you could sue. But there's a concept that applies here, which is really, I think, the overarching issue, is the old legal maxim is a volenti non fit injuria, which is that a volunteer cannot be injured. So if you agree to participate in a sport, you agree to suffer the slings and arrows, if you will, of that sport. So if I, as a hockey player, agree to go out in a contact sport hockey game and I get body checked, I can't sue someone for body checking me. Now, if I was walking down the street and somebody came along and body checked me and flattened me into the sidewalk, I probably could sue them. And they might actually get charged criminally with assault. But what would be the same action on the street is not actionable criminally or civilly in the arena, because I am a volunteer. I have agreed to participate in the sport. I have agreed to the contact that goes with that sport. Now that's where I think your point comes along. So the fine print, if you will, of my agreement is the rules of the game. So there are various rules, and I think there are elements of the rules of the game. So, for example, your slashing analogy in hockey, it's a penalty to get slashed. There can be hard slashes. It can be a 5-minute penalty, but I don't think anyone would be bringing a lawsuit in a NHL game, for example, if they got slashed against the person who did the slashing, even if they got a penalty, because there's a degree, even though it's penalized within the game, that I consent, if you will, to participate in that game, that with the effect that may occur to me that I may get slashed and my opponent may get a penalty for it within the rules of the game. And then I think there are conduct that goes beyond the rules of the game that nobody agreed to. Nobody, for example, I'm thinking of an incident that occurred a number of years ago that no one would agree to a slashing call where somebody took a stick, for example, and started bashing me over the head with it repeatedly, or started whacking me in the face with their stick. Yeah, it's a slash to some degree, but it is beyond the degree to which I consented. So there's been a number of those types of cases over the years. Maybe, Stephen, you could give our listeners some refresher on a few of those.
Sure, there have been certainly, Gavin, some very high-profile cases involving NHL players where they've been actually criminally charged. So let's hit the highlights of those cases. So the one that I certainly can remember, because it did happen here in Toronto, was Dino Ciccarelli taking his stick and using it, in the words of Luke Richardson, who was the victim at the time, who was a rookie defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Dino Ciccarelli was using his hockey stick like a baseball bat and bashing him over his helmet. So Dino Ciccarelli was charged with assault and was actually convicted of assault and spent 1 day in jail for that incident. So, and Dino Ciccarelli was a good hockey player. I mean, let's face it, he was one of the better players he played then for the Minnesota North Stars. But he was a 20-plus goal scorer, and he was criminally charged for using his stick in this assault of Luke Richardson here in Toronto. Another high-profile case was Marty McSorley when he hit, I think it was Donald Brashear, in a game in Vancouver. Marty was playing for the Boston Bruins, and he also used his stick and hit Brashear across the head, and he was charged with assault with a weapon. And he was also found guilty with respect to that. Now, he was granted a conditional discharge. He did not spend any time in jail for that, and he was also, I think, put on probation and he was ordered not to play again against Donald Brashear for that 18th-month period. The third high-profile case, which we all remember because it also really drifts into tort as well, was Todd Bertuzzi's sucker punch, I guess is how it was described, on Colorado Avalanche's Steve Moore, where Bertuzzi basically hit him from behind and then drove Stephen Moore into the ice. Stephen Moore never played hockey again. He actually broke 3 bones in his back from that incident. But Todd Bertuzzi was also charged with assault causing bodily harm for that. Again, he actually pleaded guilty. It did not go to trial. And he was sentenced as well to 1 year probation and 80 hours of community service. So, people, when they play sports, really have to keep themselves in check. If you're acting in a violent way or outside what is really the bounds of fair play, there is potential liability there for you. Both on the criminal side and on the tort side.
Yeah, and in the case of Moore and Bertuzzi, of course, there was a concurrent civil action brought by Moore with. I mean, let's just thinking about that, the injury that was caused by Bertuzzi ended Moore's career. That was that was his professional career as a player. With all of that comes along with that. And I think that, if I recall correctly, was for the lawsuit was seeking damages, north of $60 million, and which would have been theoretically the present value of what is a professional hockey career, which is a remarkable question from a damages side. And we can talk about that a bit more. A difficult one to prove from a plaintiff's perspective. But in that particular instance, I think that there was a settlement, and he sued not only Bertuzzi, but he sued the organization. I think that was he sued the other players on the team, and seeking damages against all of them for this incident involving Todd Bertuzzi, the coach, the team, the captain of the team, etc. That was an interesting cast of characters as far as defendants goes.
Well, it was very interesting. I think it was actually Bertuzzi who third-partied his own coach at a point in time during the proceeding, because I guess what came out, or what the rumor was, that it related that Bertuzzi's actions were basically in retribution for a hit that's Stephen Moore leveled against the Vancouver captain, who I think was Marcus Naslund at the time, in a prior game, and that basically, call it a quote bounty, was placed on Stephen Moore. That players from Vancouver were basically instructed that Stephen Moore had to pay the price for that hit in the subsequent game, and sure enough, Stephen Moore did pay a hefty price. As you said, Gavin, it ended his career. Now he did get a settlement, and all these cast of characters certainly were involved in the lawsuit. But that raises for me, Gavin, a very interesting question. We're seeing now in England that Matt Petgrave, who was the player who struck Adam Johnson, resulting in Johnson's death, has been, like I said, charged with involuntary manslaughter in England. But I believe as well that the family is going to be seeking civil remedy against Mr. Petgrave, and probably the team and perhaps the league, because Matt Petgrave seems to have, I can't speak to it per se, but certainly from what I've read, that he's had a history of these incidents. And I watched the incident, Gavin, on video. It's on YouTube. And it's certainly, I've played hockey a long time. I know that you've played hockey, and we've been around hockey. It looked like a deliberate, or certainly a kick to the upper body. I mean, he actually reached out with his leg and struck Mr. Johnson in the throat. So,
yeah, I think that's
it looked a little strange in terms of a hockey hit.
I mean, I think that when it first came out, when people heard that, first of all, it was a horrific incident, and I frankly have not watched it on YouTube, nor do I want to. Imagining it is enough, but the short answer is you got guys skating around with basically knives on their feet, and that's an interesting question from a legal perspective. And kind of goes back to first year criminal law. I mean, I'm reminded of the Smithers case where the guy punched the punch that caused the death, and that was a hockey related case as well. The punch that caused the death, there was no intention to kill, but there was an intention to punch, and that intention to assault or punch was sufficient to form the mental element of the crime of murder. So that. In that case, here, that's an interesting point. If there was an intention by Petgrave to kick Johnson, misplaced, I don't think the charge would indicate that there was no intention to kill Johnson.
Right, but that's the involuntary manslaughter, right?
Right, but there's sufficient intention to conduct a criminal injury on your opponent. I mean, no one in a hockey game, there's lots of things that can happen, but nobody consents to getting kicked in the upper body by someone's skate blade. And I say upper body, I mean, I think that it's tragic that the skate blade came into contact with the unexposed or the exposed rather neck of the victim. If it had kicked them in the chest, which is protected by shoulder pads or whatever, probably would hurt a lot. And there probably would have been a pretty major penalty, but Mr. Johnson would be with us still. So that raises a really interesting issue: is would that be sufficient to form the mental element of that charge from a criminal perspective? Potentially.
Well, certainly, I think for the involuntary manslaughter, remember, you're not looking necessarily at intention in an involuntary manslaughter case, right? It's an unlawful killing done without an intention to kill. So what you have in Matt Petgrave's case is whether he had an intent to kick doesn't really flow into the unintentional result, which was Mr. Johnson's death.
Right, but from a criminal perspective, the intent to kick illegally and assault, that intention would be sufficient, I would think, and I'm not, criminal law is certainly not my area of practice, but I would think it would be sufficient to form the mental element of the charge of involuntary manslaughter, at least in Canada. I mean, if I intend to kick you and I kick you and by, tragically that kills you, that is by definition manslaughter, isn't it?
It is, and just backing away from, let's say Mr. Johnson didn't die from the incident, right? The intent to kick would be the assault. And I think that's what we've seen in all those other cases with McSorley, Dino Ciccarelli, and Todd Bertuzzi, is that there was an intent to cause some kind of injury, whether it was using the stick or using your fist, which resulted in assault charges, right? None of the players in those incidents died.
Well, in the Ciccarelli case, I don't think Richardson was particularly hurt. I mean, Ciccarelli was pounding him on his helmet. Probably had a headache, but nothing more serious than that. But that's very different, and it raises, I think, an interesting tort question too. From, as you mentioned, that the family of Mr. Johnson may be trying to sue the league. So. And as I suggested to you, hockey players are wearing suits of armor to some extent, but one of the chinks in that suit of armor is the neck. And neck guards are not mandatory in professional hockey, at least, or they're not mandatory certainly in the NHL. They're often mandatory now in minor hockey leagues. I know, in the GTHL they are mandatory. And if Mr. Johnson had been wearing a neck guard, he probably would have had a pretty serious injury still, but I don't know if he'd be dead because the neck guard would theoretically have prevented the skate from slicing his throat, which is the cause of his death. So is there a claim to be made against the league for failing to mandate the wearing of neck guards?
Well, that's a good point, but I think more importantly in Mr. Petgrave's situation, if Mr. Petgrave had a history of these incidents, of sticking his leg out and perhaps injuring other opponents or doing this on a regular basis, was the league responsible potentially for banning him from playing in the league before the incident even occurred? And have they really followed their procedure in terms of penalizing him? So there have actually been cases. There was one in the United States. I think it was around, maybe it was a 2016 period. Don't quote me on dates, but regardless, where a rink was sued in a tort case for an injury that happened to somebody in a on-ice incident. But that case against the arena was actually dismissed because it was not reasonably foreseeable that the player who punched the other player causing an injury was actually going to punch the other player. So the rink itself was not responsible for regulating the league that was playing in its arena. But here, in this case, we do. We have a league that is regulating this sport, regulating the conduct of its players, and did it do enough? And so maybe there is a potential liability there, and that's I think Gavin really goes to, for those who manage leagues such as the Adult Safe Hockey League, that they really do have to pay attention to what happens with certain players. I mean, I quit hockey a number of years ago, Gavin, because I was involved in a game. I play in net, and I'm fighting for my position as a goaltender, and the guy basically turned around, grabbed my helmet, and tried to twist my head off. And so, I don't need that in life. I'm 30 years old at the time. Did this player have a history? If I had been injured, could I have gone after the league that operated the hockey that I was playing in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes to a question of notice. I mean, just for the listener's perspective, I mean, I think a lot of people will be raising their eyebrows when we talk about that U.S. case where the arena was sued for an injury that occurred to a player in that arena who was involved in a amateur kind of fun pickup game, a hockey type league where they rent the arena, they pay to play, not the other way around. And, how could the arena be responsible? And why on earth would anybody try to sue the arena for that? I mean, I think that one of the things the listeners said, the lawyers again will be chuckling. One of the things as a lawyer in a plaintiff case, ultimately what you're looking for is a damages payment. And ultimately damages awards from courts are as good as, they're only as good as the person they are made against. So if you've got a situation where you're suing someone who has no money, even if they are liable, you're never going to collect on that judgment. So you'll often see plaintiffs trying to find liability against parties that are solvent and that are capable of paying a judgment, and even more importantly, have insurance. So in the case of the arena, you can see the creativity of the plaintiff lawyer in that instance, trying to find some liability on the part of that arena, which undoubtedly had insurance and undoubtedly had the ability to pay some portion of a judgment. There was an arena, after all, that had some value. And they were desperately, or not desperately, but they were creatively trying to find a way in to get liability. I think in that case, and this is really where you see the issue in a lot of these types of venues, is there are always exclusion of liability clauses in respect of this type of thing. I mean, I'm thinking of like reading the back of my ski ticket as I go down the hill, where there's a huge exclusion of liability on the part of the ski hill. if I happen to get injured. Otherwise, obviously, if there wasn't, there wouldn't be any ski hills because, with all it would take is a few injuries to bankrupt the ski hill if they could be sued for those kind of damages. I think that hockey arenas are probably in the same category.
Well, and I'm glad you raised the limitation of liability clause, Gavin, because it's not necessarily bulletproof. Limitation of liability clauses sometimes are only as good as one drawing attention to the user that there is a limitation of liability, but it also goes to what is the service that's being provided by the operator. So, if the operator provides equipment, for example, and the equipment is defective, the limitation of liability clause will not protect the operator. A number of years ago, there was a rafting case in Canada where I think somebody actually was either seriously injured. They may have actually been killed in the incident, where the rafting company relied on a limitation of liability clause. I believe that limitation of liability clause was not applied because of the responsibility to the operator and what they promoted with respect to these rafting trips. So there are a number of cases that speak to the issue of limitation of liability clause. But I think more importantly, Gavin, with respect to civil liability, there has been recently a shift in the law. And that it used to be that a player in a sport, let's say hockey, for example, had to have some form of intent in terms of causing the injury. And really, there's been a shift, and it's in a case called Casterton versus McIsaac, where the court found that basically the test is whether the incident that led to the injury was in the bounds of fair play. So in the Casterton case, it was basically a player was rounding the net, was hit blindsided by the opponent, who ended up becoming the defendant, and the court found that the blindside hit went beyond fair play. The defendant was skating at a high rate of speed. The plaintiff who was coming around the net never saw the defendant and was basically hit very hard. And let's talk about damages, Gavin. The damages in that case were significant. They were over $400,000 of damages awarded because the injury was so significant it caused a concussion to the plaintiff and had long-lasting impacts. So he was awarded general damages for the injury, for the concussion, but it was the loss of income that really inflated the damages award, past loss of income and future loss of income. So, some of these damages awards can be very significant. When we talk about creative lawyers, a lot of people don't have $500,000 to pay damages awards. So you're kind of looking for a deeper pocket, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, damages awards, are like anything else. They're only as good as the party that they're made against, and if the ability of that party to pay. So, for example, a damage award, a judgment against someone is got to be enforced, and if there's no money to enforce against, if that person is insolvent, you're not going to be able to collect. And therefore, you've got a judgment for whatever that's worth, and that you've obviously expended great time and effort to obtain, that you'll never collect on. So pretty hollow remedy. I mean, those cases always are always difficult. I mean, I actually had a case a number of years ago involving a very highly ranked junior hockey player who was hit from behind. Suffered a broken back. It ended his hockey career. And as I say, he was very, very highly ranked, and was thought to have been going in either the first or second round in the NHL draft out of junior hockey. And that all ended in an instant. And we sued and whatnot. But I'll never forget that I met with an expert with regards to that. And the expert was a head of scouting for an NHL team. And they were talking about the great variable issue of where you're ranked and where you get drafted, how much money you're going to make, and how difficult that is to determine what the loss of future income in a situation like that might be, just because sports is so speculative in the sense of who is going to do well, who is going to have a long career, who's going to have a short career, how quickly it can end, and or not begin at all. And that was a very difficult damages question, which I think would arise in all these cases. Potentially not in this one, because this was not dealing with the end of a professional career in sport. It was just the fact that this gentleman who was employed had a loss of income claim as a result of the injury, very much like he would have in a car accident or something else of that nature. So, but those are always troubling questions, both from a liability perspective and otherwise. And when do you go from, wow, that was a clean, good hit, to know that is a tortious contact? It's such a fine line. It's such a fine line. I mean, I always think of the, absolutely devastating hit by Stevens on Eric Lindros. It was within the bounds of the game as those rules were at the time. Yeah, it ended the career of probably one of the greatest players in the history of the league. But was it something that player had agreed to? Was he a volunteer in regards to that hit? Did he know that was in the realm of things that he could expect in regards to playing in that game on that day? Difficult question.
So, Gavin, I think the key takeaway for me from all these cases is that, look, what happens in a professional game should certainly not be taken to the amateur rink. And that if you're playing one of these sports, you can face potential criminal liability for a hit on an opponent, if it's certainly beyond the rules of play, or you can face potential civil liability. So people need to be careful when they, step onto that field or step onto the ice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that, look, the reality of it is they call it playing for a reason, and that's because it's supposed to be fun. And, trying to kill somebody or bang them into next week or put them in the hospital, if that's your idea of fun, you really, maybe you shouldn't be playing sport. Maybe you should be seeking some therapy. But in any event, very troubling incident, the incident in England, the incidents that we've talked about, and they really are a bit of a stain on what is, really should be one of the more pleasurable and inspiring types of human endeavor, which is sport, which I think we all enjoy both watching and participating in, and should be invariably a good thing. And when we see somebody dying, that is just not fun, and that is not what sports should be about. And people need to be appreciative of the fact that there can be very, very serious consequences to what is, something that happens in an instant. Anyways, with those somber notes of reflection, we're going to wrap this episode up. Thank you all very much for listening once again to this episode of Beneath the Law. We really appreciate the fact that you tune in to hear these, our ruminations on various legal matters and societal issues and the interplay of law and society. Please, if you can, rate us. We really appreciate anyone who's giving us a rating, 5-star ratings, so I'll just be candid. But if any rating will do, because we love the feedback and it helps us to make this a little bit better and helps us to change the things that we're doing badly, to make them good, and to keep doing, hopefully, the things that are good and that you're enjoying. So once again, Stephen, thanks so much. To our producer, Doug Downs, thank you. And everyone, please always remember that if no one is above the law, then everyone is beneath it.